It's me, Priya. I'm in for Casa. We're going to focus on farmer protests in India now. An estimated 250 million people are taking part, and it's thought to be the biggest protest in history. But what do you know about why farmers are protesting? What have you seen on social media that's caught your attention? Now, the first thing we want to do is separate fact from misinformation. So first up, let's hear an explainer of the issue with our reporter, Raj Kaur-Bilku.
The protests are over new agriculture laws that will come into effect in a couple of years' time. Currently, farmers sell their crops in mandis, which are government-controlled wholesale markets. A middleman brokers deals with buyers and handles the transport and storage of crops. He is the one who gets payments to farmers. They get a minimum support price known as MSP for their crops. But Narendra Modi's government wants to introduce free markets and get rid of the middleman altogether. The ruling Bharatiya Janata Party want farmers to sell their crops, so your atta, your rice, directly to buyers like supermarkets and other companies. But farmers are worried that the new system will crush them. They reckon corporates will buy at whatever price they want and sell at whatever price they want to increase their profits. Now, most farmers in India are small landowners. They own less than 10 acres. They feel they'll be ripped off by corporates or won't be able to compete with bigger farmers who could sell more for less and still make a profit. The government promised the mandi system and MSP will remain as a backup option, but farmers don't trust politicians. The laws were rushed through Parliament 2 months ago, and rallies against them were held locally. But 2 weeks ago, farmers from Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh descended to the capital because they felt the government was ignoring their concerns. They've been kept at the border by the police and paramilitary, who have, at times, used force to hold crowds back with tear gas and water cannons. There have been clashes between protesters and police. The farmers say they're just exercising their democratic right to protest. The authorities say they're responding to public disorder. Modi's government has invited farmers' unions for talks, but so far they haven't struck a deal. Ministers offered to put in writing that farmers will get the MSP, that's the minimum guaranteed price for crops, once these laws come into force. But farmers have rejected that. They believe the MSP will be overthrown by corporates. Many highways along Delhi's borders are clogged with protesters who have travelled by foot or tractor. They've set up camps with community kitchens and are sleeping on the cold winter streets. They're adamant they'll stay for as long as it takes for the new farming laws to be scrapped.
So those are the facts. Thanks very much to Raj. Now, critics are saying that the issue is actually being hijacked by groups who've got their own agendas. So it's being made into a religious or caste issue. Is that something you agree with or that you've seen happening? We had loads of people get in touch with me yesterday when we talked about the whole farmer protest issue more broadly. And you can do the same again today. You can call me on 03459 440 445. You can text on 81869 or tweet us at BBC Asian Network. We're going to get into this now. We've got Karen Gill, who's actually got land in the Punjab and works with the Punjabi Language Association. Sonal Sher, who's actually only started paying attention to the issue since seeing the protest that happened in central London last weekend. And Dawinderpal Singh, who's the press officer at the Sikh Press Association. Good afternoon to the three of you. Thanks for coming on. I actually want to start by speaking to Karen, and just as somebody who's got land in the Punjab, how do you feel seeing what's going on?
Hi, Priya. I feel really sad. I felt very emotional when I saw what happened to the farmers when they were moving into Delhi, and the tear gas, and then all the issues with the police, and it was very quiet. I was worried. But at the same time, I'm so proud of the movement, the rally. I can't believe that they went to Delhi. They actually did it. It's unbelievable. And it is the largest protest rally in history. And I just cannot believe that the people of Punjab and neighbouring states, they got together collectively and they actually did this.
The word proud has actually been used a lot, which is interesting when it's also been used alongside quite emotive kind of language when they see scenes of quite elderly farmers protesting. Why is this kind of sense of proudness coming into it?
I think because Punjab is partitioned land and we are the people of the partition, there's been a lot of pain. there's been a lot of bloodshed in history with the people of Punjab in particular, and it's taken us a long time to get here. It's taken us a long time.
Right. So you've kind of given us the perspective of perhaps, what it can feel like on the ground in India. But we've also got Dawinderpal and Sonal. And the three of you, you're British Asians. Dawinderpal, welcome to the show. How does it feel for you watching it as a British Asian?
Hi, Priya. Similarly, a great sense of pride, great sense of, seeing. I think that pride is rooted in seeing, small farmers stand up to big business, big corporations, big government as well. The farmers of Punjab have been exploited for a long time now, and this is something that's kind of been building up over time. And these new measures, they were introduced last year in June, or they were kind of announced last year in June, and from then, things have been getting worse and worse. So to see, resistance, I think is very inspiring.
And does that get to the heart of why you've been following it all so closely?
So we've been following it as the Sikh Press Association because there's such a large number of Sikhs involved, and it's, Punjab, it's the land in Punjab, which is, the Sikh homeland.
But it's not a Sikh issue.
It affects it's not just a Sikh issue, but it does affect every Sikh.
Sorry, I don't want to cut in, but it's an issue, a global issue. Can I just make that clear, that this issue with being under big corporations is a global issue. The farming issue is a global issue. It's a Punjabi issue. It's the Union States, our neighbour Rajasthan, UP, Gujarat. It's an issue all over. I don't think we can actually start putting out people in boxes and start sort of categorising. I think that's really sort of, you're missing the point here, and I feel like we're diverting away from actually what the issue really is. If you look at Brazil, they're going for the same movement. I really do think we need to focus on what the issue is. The issue is that these bills were passed very quietly behind closed doors, without discussing any discussions, any consultation with any farmer or any farmers union during a global pandemic. They were passed.
Okay, and so Karen, let's just see Dawinderpal. What would you like to say to that?
So I fully agree, 100%. It's fully a farmer's issue, the way in which these bills were introduced. The reason I even mentioned the Sikh is because I was asked specifically about why the Sikh Press Association is involved, and our angle is because it affects Sikhs. But it doesn't just affect Sikhs. I'm fully with you. I fully believe that it affects the whole world. And, the more people that are aware of this, the better.
Now, so these laws that we're talking about, these reforms, they were passed through Parliament in India legally, but that doesn't mean, obviously, that people like what the actual reforms are and what it is that they're going to, the change that they're going to bring about. Sonal, let me bring you in, because obviously you're someone who's only really taken notice of what's happening because of recent protests here in the UK. How much do you actually understand of the issue?
Hi, Priya. Yes, I was listening to both, and I've literally had to sort of do just sort of like a quick read up of everything I could find, and I'm trying to sort of come at it from an angle, sort of a British Asian, and sort of try and sort of see pros and cons. So I think there's kind of three issues here. It's sort of the bill in itself and how it reads. I don't know how many people have read it, but I have read it, and actually it sort of reads very, very well. It's a creation of an ecosystem where farmers and traders enjoy the freedom of choice. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It promotes efficiencies, transparent and barrier-free interstate trade outside of the physical premises of the mandis. And the third thing is it provides a facilitative framework for electronic trading. Now, I read this and absolutely nothing wrong with it, okay? Now, the second thing that comes into play is pros and cons. Now, as the people have already mentioned, when you pass any significant laws, unilaterally, there is going to be a problem, and I completely sort of get the point, where adequate consultation hasn't been taken place. People are going to be anxious and people are going to be concerned. And I have actually spoken to a very, very dear friend who is Punjabi, just to sort of get to speed with this. And yes, he was worried. He said, I don't know what's going to happen because I'm a small farmer. And I think that's one of the concerns. But one of the things that then, one of the pros is that since the 60s, India has had to have sort of very protectionist policies with agriculture, which was just right because that is what was needed. But now when we look at it sort of, 50 years later, India produces a surplus. India is actually the second largest producer of wheat, okay, which means there's a waste. There's less crop diversity because, when you protect some crops and you're kind of offering minimum support prices, farmers are only going to produce that much. The environmental impact of what happens when you are only producing certain crops. And actually, it's a disproportionate benefit to large farms as well at the moment. So just to kind of put it in perspective, $14 billion of food is wasted. That's 40% of the food. So I think everybody needs to understand that there is some kind of reform needed now. But what it is and how it works, we don't know if these three bills are going to work. We don't know what's going to happen. But maybe there is a point to sort of let it happen and see what happens.
Sana, you're probably, sorry to cut in, you're probably one of the more positive people that have come on to speak about this, which is interesting because actually you're someone who's sought to go out and educate themselves starting from a point where you didn't know as much, which is
start from zero.
Yeah, which is completely fair. But hang on a minute. Yeah. But I mean, do you kind of and you mentioned a friend that you spoke to as well. But so I'm assuming you do have empathy for farmers who this is being criticised because you have got farmers with small plots of land who are going to have to cut their own deals with companies, and their prices that they get won't be protected as they have been.
I think the MSP, as I think your report said, will remain in place. So right now, as far as we know right now, in this point in time, the MSP isn't being, scrapped. It is there. Now, my interest sort of stemmed from when I saw the protest the other day outside.
In the UK, in London.
In the UK, in London. And I was kind of, obviously, when something happens locally, you kind of just want to know what's going on. And I saw sort of, there were different sort of, there's Khalistani support, there's communist support, there's sort of Maoist, Naxalite sort of, people that are actually joining this. And I think that is what's happening. The actual problems that farmers are facing is being almost hijacked by sort of, politics and politicians that may have other agenda.
So you want to make sure, as Karen was saying, that actually we focus on the actual issue that's been disputed. Dawinderpal, would you say that it's an issue? Do you think the issue being described here, for example, as that it's been a far-right Hindu government against Sikh farmers? Because, as I said, and as we've said, it's not a Sikh issue. And it's not just Sikh farmers who are protesting, but it is coming into it, and it is something that people are saying.
Yeah, I think this is an issue of an oppressive regime and an oppressive government, oppressive policies from government affecting small farmers. I think it's a human rights issue.
Your wording isn't right. You're actually calling a democratically elected government an oppressive regime,
I'm saying that these measures are oppressive.
You have to use your words correctly. This is a world forum. You can't call one of the biggest democracies where people, where a government has been chosen democratically.
Okay, Karen, Can I just hang on? Let's just let Dawinderpal finish what he was going to say.
Sure. So I think what Fanil's saying there is, it shows that she's only been covering this story for the last week because Kaushik Basu, who's a professor of economics at Cornell University, and he's a former chief economist of the World Bank, recently said that now that he's had a chance to fully study in these new farm bills, he's changed his mind and he realises that they are flawed and that they will be detrimental to farmers, and that agricultural regulation does need to change, and the new laws will end up serving the corporate interests more than the farmers. He's just come out and said this, and this is, a top expert on India's agriculture and economy. So I think he, at first, it's very easy to buy into the media from India who, paint a very different side of the story to the reality. I mean, you mentioned the food surplus. That's very different from the reality. The reality is there's hundreds of millions of people starving in India. So there's something not right if there's food being thrown out.
Exactly, and that's the infrastructure, and that's what needs to be set in place. There is no cold storage infrastructure. There are supply chain bottlenecks. Logistics are not there. So whatever has been happening for the last 50 years is not working. How, you've just said it yourself. India is a country where people are starving, and we have, as Indians, we have so much food.
Hang on a minute, guys. Hang on. There's three of you. Let me, Karen, I'll come to you in just 1 second. Sorry. Let's just kind of focus on the fact that we're all getting quite animated and involved in a topic which is affecting British Asians for various reasons, regardless of religion or where in India their roots might be. And so why do we think that is? Because that surely shows that this is not an issue for one group more than another, and that we should surely just be focusing on the welfare of farmers, which is the one thing that I'm sure we agree we all care about, right?
Yeah, I think, can I just say, Priya, that Sanal, I know Dawinderpal just used the word democracy, and you've got your viewpoints about it, but the way that the farmers were hit and beaten and tear gassed and water cannon, I mean, I don't know, like, if you have family in India, I'm not quite sure, what state you're from, but I have family there, and my family are from Ludhiana, and they travel to there. It's like a 9-hour drive from Punjab to Delhi. Those of you who live in Punjab, you will know that. It's not around the corner, and they are sleeping on the floor, on the roads, in the freezing cold weather. They did not deserve to be beaten up, and they did not deserve to be treated in that way. They're protesting. They are protesting peacefully. If you are actually on the ground there, you will understand there's music, there's cinema going on, there's food. It's like a political carnival.
I know.
And Karen,
there isn't any violence. There isn't any violence. No, they are loving each other, and each state has neighbouring them has joined them. People are coming and giving them blankets. It's a really beautiful, peaceful rally. So I think the government did not need to do this to the protesters. Don't deserve that, because they didn't. There was no violence. And democratic, they did not. They quietly passed these laws without any consultation.
No. I think one of the things that
hang on, it doesn't work if you all talk at once. So give each other space.
Because I let you have your time as well. But the reforms are needed, and I talk about Punjab because that's where I'm from. The Punjab farmers have been talking about reforms in agriculture for over 70 years. So in the 1980s, we had a rally then as well about the same issue. Our waters have been taken. Not 1 rupee has been paid to the Punjab, even though it says in the Constitution of India that any time a state offers their waters, they must be paid. Other states have been paid. Punjab hasn't been paid. There are ongoing issues. There are issues that the government needs to listen and address the issue of the people.
And now Sonal, the government has been welcoming farmers in for talks, but obviously they haven't concluded in any kind of agreement. So do we think that... Hang on, I'm asking a question. No, wait, listen. So the question is, do we think that there's anything that the government could offer at this stage which would be met with the protests coming to an end and farmers being satisfied?
I think the government needs to sit with the farmers around the table, and the reforms are needed. The farmers are not saying they don't want reforms, but they want to be consulted. And it's not just MSP. There's so many other issues. And you know what, Sanal, just going back to your point about MSP, they might be saying it's here now, but what the farmers are saying is eventually the big corporations will push it out. And we've seen this happen here in the UK.
Okay, Sonal, hang on a minute.
What you have to realise is out of the 35 organisations that have actually gone into speaking about the farmers, and you have to realise that this is a pan-India issue, and I don't understand why there's 31 organisations that are from Punjab or have sort of connections to Punjab. So again, it's quite disproportionate, because it doesn't seem that the rest of India or the farmers in Bihar or the South or Maharashtra have the same concerns. So
again, you need to kind of say that as well. Bihar, they actually introduced this law in 2006, and if you research on what the Bihar farmers actually say about it, they say it's the worst piece of regulation that's ever come in for them. It's really negatively affected their life.
I've also seen farmers from Bihar saying they actually prefer the regulation. This is what I'm trying to say. It's a complex issue.
If you look at it from a logical point of view, it's pitting.
Karen, let's just hear from Karen for a second.
Can I just speak for a second, Sanhal? Punjab is an agrarian land, so we supply 70% of the wheat and rice to India. That's a massive, huge percentage. So if anyone's going to have unions, it's going to be Punjab.
Do we think, though, Karen, do you think, though, because at the start of this, you were kind of quite hot on saying that it's not an issue that just affects one group of people. Do you think we need to look at it as an India-wide issue?
Oh, it is looking. Can I just ask who's not looking at it as an India-wide issue? Because I definitely am. And I think it's not even India. I don't think it stops in India. I think this is a global issue. This is about the big corporations.
But I don't see anybody else speaking except sort of...
Well, I don't know. I don't know where Sanal's getting her information from. But
I have literally been looking everywhere, and trust me, I have actually spoken to people.
Okay, hang on.
I can send you quite a lot of information.
Sonal, Karen, Dawinderpal. Right, so I want to know, before we wrap this up, because obviously everybody has got an angle and probably also a vested interest in why they care so much about this. But it has really motivated British Asian people here in the UK to also come out and protest. So where do we go from here? Dawinderpal, I'll come to you first. Where do we go from here? Just briefly, if you can. Firstly, how should the farmers, do you think, be going forward with negotiations in terms for how they want to get the best thing out of it for them? And what role do you think British Asians need to be playing without kind of hijacking the issue at all?
Sure. So I think the farmers have dealt with the issue in an exemplary fashion. I think they've been faultless, in my opinion. I think what we need to do is just look at this for the issue that it is. It's the issue of corporations. It's, we've got a negotiation table, and we've got small farmers with small farms versus big business, big multinational businesses. And until now, they've had the protection of the state, of the government. Offering this minimum price as competition to big business. Now, that's going to stay in place probably for a short time. Now, when that goes, then you've just got a negotiating table with one small farmer versus big business, which is why all of the unions are actually supporting the farmers as well. And I think that's, the way in which we can help in the West and in Britain and, everywhere else, is to raise awareness of this, because like Karen said, that this is not just a Punjabi issue. It's not even just an India issue. This is a global issue. And the more that we can raise awareness of this, and the more we can get people like, these top professors and top scientists to actually, verify what we're saying and vouch for, this argument, the better. Okay,
and before we go, Karen, what would your kind of final takeaway thoughts be, just quickly to wrap up?
I just think that the farmers need to continue their dialogue with the government, and they all need to walk away from this happy. Reforms are needed. Everyone agrees with that. So it's just a matter of being happy and being protected. The farmers want protection. They want reassurance. They want someone to listen to. And I think that's what dialogue needs to continue. This is something that's not going to finish overnight. It's going to continue on for some time, and it takes time for change. And the government just need to continue their dialogue and sit down with farmers.
And Sonal, for you, as someone who was slightly more optimistic about when you read what the reforms actually are, and you don't think they read all that badly, what do you think is the way forward?
I actually think, that there are reforms. We all agree on that one, that the reforms are needed. I think, there should be a dialogue. The farmers shouldn't go into a negotiation saying, we want either a yes or a no. There has to be some giveaway. That's how negotiations work. The second thing I want to point out is that it's very reckless that British Asians, and we all have connections to India, Punjab or elsewhere, we should be supporting the Farm Bill because of farmers, not because there are Khalistani community support, communists supporting it. We need to choose our allies. Our allies are farmers, not the others, and those should be completely, we should cut them out of the equation, and then that's how we go forward.
Sonal, Karen, Dawinderpal, thank you all so much. We continue to cover this subject here on Asian Network. That's it for today, though.